Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The doorbell rang extra harshly on the silent Sunday afternoon. Nathan Miller stood in his foyer and hesitated for a few seconds before reaching for the door. He hadn't had a visitor in a long time, especially without advance notice. When the door opened, Nathan's world seemed to stop spinning. Standing before him was the daughter he hadn't seen in 3 years, Emma. Her long brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes were red and puffy like she had just cried. 3 years. Not really seeing his daughter for 3 whole years, only watching her basketball games and school activities from afar without her knowledge. 3 years ago, she sent that short, hurtful text, "I hate you. Never contact me again." Nathan felt breathless, as if his lungs were refusing to work. Emma had her arms wrapped around a medium-sized cardboard box that seemed to weigh her down, not only physically, but emotionally as well. "Emma," he finally said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Daddy." Her reply was barely audible. "Can I come in?" Nathan sidestepped to make way, moving as if programmed to do so. His spacious villa on the outskirts of Washington suddenly felt unusually depressing. The house was part of his rebuilding his image after the divorce, declaring to the community that Nathan Miller would not be destroyed by Sarah, by anyone. 3 days later, the news broke. A well-known sales executive was arrested for fraud and embezzlement and tried to flee the country. Brian's name was all over the headlines. The details of his betrayal of his company and family are detailed in humiliating fashion. The scandal is being discussed on major social media, industry forums, and local news. Former Miller and Taylor partner arrested for fraud, hundreds of thousands of dollars unaccounted for. That's the headline in the local paper. Betrayal and ruin. How Brian Taylor lost it all. That's the title of a feature article in a construction industry magazine. Sarah has not been spared in the various reports. As the wife of a fraudster, her once carefully maintained social image collapsed overnight. Friends from her past publicly disowned her on social media. A committee of charitable organizations asked her to resign from her position, and even the gym where she attends yoga classes politely asked her to consider working out at a different location. Sarah tries to contact Emma, but her daughter only replies briefly that she needs time to think and has chosen to live with her father for the time being. For Sarah, it's a wound deeper than monetary loss, the loss of her daughter's trust. In the aftermath, Emma spends more time making sense of everything that has happened in the last 3 years. She has a long conversation with Nathan and learns about his elaborate revenge plan, how to buy Brian's gambling debts, how to track down his infidelities, and how to uncover evidence of his theft of company and family funds. "You could have totally destroyed Mom," Emma commented one night as they sat in the backyard, the sunset coloring the sky, "but you chose to focus on Brian." "Brian's crimes are serious enough to be self-destructive," Nathan replied. "And once his true colors are revealed, your mother will suffer the inevitable consequences. Do you think she'll recover from all this?" Nathan stared off into the distance. "She'll survive. She has lost the life she built, her reputation, and most likely her house and financial stability. But most importantly, she lost your trust. There is no worse punishment for a mother." Emma looked at the side of her father's face, trying to understand the man who could orchestrate and execute such a comprehensive revenge over the course of 3 years. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Expose the true nature of the people who lied to you and stole our future together." Nathan shook his head. "Never." Meanwhile, Sarah faces an entirely different reality. Brian was denied bail, and she was left alone to face her debts and legal problems. When she divorced Nathan, she took a significant portion of her property and money with her. Now, those assets have all but disappeared, squandered, or hidden by Brian. The FBI and the DA's office contacted Sarah and asked her to cooperate with the investigation into Brian's financial crimes. They suspected that the frauds were more extensive than initially discovered and may have involved deception against her. As she sits in a cold federal building conference room in front of two serious agents, Sarah clearly recognizes that her world has changed forever. 3 years ago, she betrayed Nathan, trusting Brian's commitment and charm. Now, she's paying the price, losing her daughter's respect, her social standing, and her financial security. "Ms. Miller," an agent said, "your husband could face 10 to 15 years in prison. If you know anything that could help us recover these funds, now is the time to tell us." Sarah felt a wave of nausea as she looked at the papers in front of her. All evidence of Brian's fraud. I don't know. He lied to me, just like he did to everyone else. The agent exchanged a look. Then you may have been victimized as well. But you need to prove it. That night, Sarah returned to her empty apartment and was greeted by nothing but silence. No Emma. No pretend perfect marriage. No social circle. No future worth bragging about. There is only the painful realization of regret and remorse. She pulled out her cell phone and hesitated for a long time before finally sending a message to Nathan. I'd like to meet with Emma. She'll decide when she's ready to see you. Nathan's reply was short and cold. Sarah stared at her cell phone screen, tears blurring her vision. She now understands what Nathan has been feeling for the past 3 years: rejected, isolated, robbed of contact with his children. It was the perfect revenge for her to experience the pain he had gone through. A week later, at Emma's request, she met with her mother at a neutral coffee shop. Sarah arrived early and waited nervously. When Emma walks in, Sarah barely recognizes her daughter. She looks more mature, more determined, and there's a new alertness in her eyes. Mom, Emma said simply as she sat down. Thank you for wanting to see me. Sarah's voice quivered. I have a lot of questions. Emma got right to the point. I need the truth. The whole truth. Sarah took a deep breath. I'll tell you everything. I owe you these. For the next 2 hours, mother and daughter had an honest but painful conversation. Sarah admits how her affair with Brian began, how she allowed him to manipulate Emma's view of her father after the divorce, and the decision to hide all of Nathan's communications. I hated him then, Sarah said softly. I wanted to hurt him as much as I felt he had hurt me. I didn't think it would turn out like this. That's no excuse. Emma's voice was firm. You made me believe that Daddy didn't love me. You stole 3 years of my relationship with him. Sarah lowered her head. I know. I can never make up for that. No, you can't. Emma stood up. I'm going back to Dad. I'm not sure when I'll be able to forgive you, Mom. Sarah watches her daughter leave and realizes that this is her punishment. Not prison, not financial hardship, but the loss of her daughter's love and trust. Nathan's vengeance is more thorough than any legal action. When Emma returns to Nathan's house, she finds her father working in his study. How was the meeting? He asked, putting down his pen. Mom admitted everything, Emma replied, sitting across the desk, and she had a complete breakdown. Lost everything. Nathan just nodded, his expression calm. You've won, Dad, Emma observed. Your revenge is complete. It's not revenge, Emma, Nathan corrected. It's justice. It's the truth. There is a difference. Emma pondered the words and then asked the question that had been bothering her. Will you help Mommy? Now she's lost everything. Nathan's expression hardened. No, I won't. Everyone pays for their choices. Your mom chose to betray our marriage, chose to collude with Brian to lie to you about me. Those were her choices, and now she's facing the consequences. That's cold, Emma said softly. That's true, Nathan replied. People are always trying to get redemption and a second chance for those who hurt them. But some behaviors are too deep and too calculated to be forgiven. Your mom's not an innocent bystander, Emma. She is an active participant. Emma was silent for a long time, digesting her father's words. Eventually, she nodded. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. You don't have to choose my path. Nathan's voice softened a bit. You can choose to forgive her if that's what you want. But that has to be your choice, based on the whole truth, not the lies she and Brian made up. Emma stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the garden. I think I need time to think about it all. You have all the time in the world, Nathan said. I'm not going anywhere. Over the next few months, Brian's trial became popular local news. He was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment with no possibility of early parole. Sarah had to sell her apartment, move into a small rental unit, and begin teaching at a community college to make ends meet. Her social circle disappeared completely, and the friends who had surrounded her in her glory days now shunned her. Emma started college and chose to major in architectural design, somewhat influenced by her father. She saw her mother occasionally, but those meetings were always brief and awkward. The damage is too deep for trust to be rebuilt. Nathan's life moved on. Miller Architects has prospered under his leadership. His revenge is complete, and his life is refocused on his work and rebuilding his relationship with his daughter. Sometimes, when he's working late at night, he thinks about Sarah and his past life. not with nostalgia, but with a cool satisfaction, knowing that those who betrayed him have paid the price, and that he, Nathan Miller, has been completely victorious. Justice, late but never absent. On Emma's 19th birthday, Nathan gave her a special gift, a photo album filled with pictures of her happy childhood, those precious moments they spent together as a family. To remember the good old days, he said, and to remind us that no matter how brutal life can be, we can survive. Emma flipped through the album, stopping at a family photo. She was 10 years old, sitting on Nathan's shoulder as Sarah stood next to her, smiling. That was before the betrayal, before the lies, before everything fell apart. We can never go back, can we? She asked in a small voice. No, Nathan replied honestly, we can't. But we can move forward. We can create new memories and build new relationships, this time built on truth, not lies. Emma closed her eyes and remembered the pain and confusion of the last 3 years, and then the relief and clarity that came with the truth. She thought of her mother as she lived now, reduced from high-flying social queen to lonely, impoverished single woman. She thought of Brian, once so confident and charming, now in his cell uniform, having lost everything. You never gave up, she told her father. Even when I said I hated you, even when I pushed you away, you never stopped trying to reach me. I'll never give up on you, Nathan replied, his voice showing rare emotion, no matter what happens. Emma looked up at her father, the man who had orchestrated 3 years of revenge for justice and truth, the man who had never stopped loving her. I'm glad to be home, Dad. Nathan hugged his daughter, tightly, as if he was afraid she would disappear again. Welcome home, Emma. Outside, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the house. Elsewhere, Sarah sits alone in her Spartan apartment, staring at the empty rooms and contemplating her choices and their devastating consequences. In a federal prison, Brian Taylor lies in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, repenting that it's too late. The truth finally surfaced, and everyone paid for their actions. And for Nathan, the sweet taste of revenge has become less important than the return of his daughter. But he doesn't regret it, not at all. Some betrayals are so deep that they can only be truly ended by a complete reckoning. 10 years ago, Nathan stood at an elaborately set table and raised his glass, his smile genuine and natural, without the coldness that would later define him. Around the table, Brian Taylor and other architects raised their glasses. Sarah smiled at her husband from across the table, her beauty enhanced by the candlelight. At 35, she still manages to draw crowds. With that chestnut hair and quick wit, the very qualities that first caught Nathan's attention 15 years ago at Columbia University. At this rate, my dear, you'll soon be ruling the entire construction world, she said proudly. Not without my secret weapon, Nathan nodded to Brian. This guy took the Westfield project when everyone said it was impossible. Brian smiled modestly, despite the glint of ambition in his eyes. Just doing my job, boss. The dinner continued with easy laughter and good conversation. 8-year-old Emma was allowed to stay for the first half of the festivities, charmed with her precocious wit, and then dutifully went to bed. This was the golden age of Nathan Miller's life. He has a thriving architectural practice, a strong marriage, and a daughter who is the light of his life. Growing up from an ordinary family in Pennsylvania, Nathan has built himself into a successful man with a relentless work ethic and natural business acumen. What the people at that dinner table don't see is how that success breeds envy and how prosperity waters the seeds of betrayal. Later in the evening, as Nathan and Sarah were getting ready for bed, she wrapped her arms around him from behind. I'm proud of you, she murmured against his back. Nathan turned and hugged her. We built this together, Sarah. Everything I did was for you and Emma. I know. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, but Nathan was too content to notice. But sometimes I wonder if, with all this success, we're losing something. What do you mean? She shrugged. You work too many hours. Emma misses you. I miss you. It's only temporary, he assures. 2 more years to build up a client base, and then I can step back and delegate more work. Sarah nodded, but her expression changed a bit. Brian mentioned that he was hiring a new project manager who could take some of the pressure off of you too. Yes, Megan Wilson. She recommends it highly. That's good, Sarah said distractedly. Maybe it means you get to go home more often. But as the firm expanded, success only meant more demands. Over the next few years, Miller and Taylor Architects expanded rapidly, and Nathan and Brian traveled frequently. Megan Wilson is truly a wonderful hire, bringing in new clients and innovative design ideas. The three of them, Nathan, Brian, and Megan, become an unbeatable team. Meanwhile, Sarah becomes increasingly distant. What Nathan doesn't see is how Sarah starts confiding in Brian at company events. He missed the lingering glances, the accidental touches, the private jokes. He was too focused on building a career empire to notice that its foundations were crumbling. When Emma turns 11, the cracks in Miller's marriage begin to become impossible to ignore. Sarah develops new interests that happen to exclude Nathan. She joined a book club that coincided with evenings when he was home. She took tennis lessons just when he could join, and she planned girls' weekends with increasing frequency. "Is everything okay between us?" Nathan finally asked one night. "Of course," Sarah answered too quickly. "Why wouldn't I? You seem distracted lately." She sighed and set her glass down. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm tired of being a corporate wife whose husband is married to the company." "That's not fair, Sarah. Everything I built was for us." "No." Her voice hardened. "You built it for yourself, Nathan, because you could never stand to be ordinary." The words stung him because they contained a hint of truth. Growing up in poverty left its mark on Nathan, instilling a desire to succeed that sometimes outweighed everything else. But what he didn't know at the time, and what he came to realize later, was that Sarah's accusations were just a convenient cover for her own betrayal, which had been in the works for a long time. Miller and Taylor Architects' annual Christmas party has always been extravagant, but as the firm nears its 10th anniversary, Nathan is extra pared down. The event was held at Lakeside Manor with ice sculptures, a live orchestra, and enough food and premium drinks to please 300 guests. Hiding from your own party, Megan approaches Nathan, who is observing the festivities from a quiet corner, and hands him a fresh glass of scotch. Nathan smiled at his project manager. Megan, 40, is more striking than beautiful in the traditional sense, with a keen intelligence behind her gray eyes and a forthright attitude that has served the company well. "Just taking a moment to appreciate it all," he replied. "It's hard to believe we've come this far." "You should be proud," she said. "Although I'm surprised Sarah wasn't there for you at this important time." Nathan scans the room and realizes he hasn't seen his wife in at least half an hour. She was talking to the Petersons' wives earlier. "Actually," Megan said carefully, "I saw her walk out onto the patio about 20 minutes ago. Brian's with her." Something in Megan's tone made Nathan's stomach clench. "I'll get them." "Excuse me." The December air penetrated his tuxedo. The terrace looked empty at first glance, but a movement in the shadows of the garden below caught his attention. He walked over to the railing and looked down at the dimly lit garden. There, partially hidden behind a decorative pine tree, stood Brian and Sarah. They're not just talking. Brian's hands cupped Sarah's face, his thumbs caressing her cheeks in a decidedly intimate gesture. As Nathan watched, dumbfounded, his wife raised her head to meet his business partner, their lips meeting in a kiss that suggested long familiarity. The scene hit Nathan like a physical blow. His mind rebelled against the evidence before him, scrambling for alternative explanations even as the truth crystallized with brutal clarity. His first impulse was to immediately confront, to jump and tear them apart with both hands. But some deeper instinct stopped him. His predator-like brain, the part that had helped him beat the competition for years, took back control. Information is power. Reacting without planning is weak. Nathan quietly retreated from the terrace. He found Megan inside. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice low and deadly. She met his gaze without flinching. "I suspected it for months. When I saw them leave the airport hotel together 3 weeks ago, I was sure." "And you didn't tell me?" "I need to be sure," she replied. "And I need evidence that will stand up in court." Nathan stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I have photos, hotel receipts, text message records. I'm gathering information to protect you because I suspect this day will come." "Why are you doing this for me?" Megan's expression softened slightly. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because Miller and Taylor can't afford to have two top executives ripping into each other without preparation." Nathan nodded slowly, a calm clarity flowing through him. "Thanks." He didn't confront Sarah that night. He showed no signs that his world had just exploded. Instead, he lay beside her, listening to her breathing, planning his response in a calm and methodical way. Over the next 3 months, Nathan became an accomplished actor. He keeps it normal on the surface while working behind the scenes with a ruthless divorce attorney. He secured Megan's evidence, consulted a financial advisor about protecting his assets, and made strategic business moves to reduce Brian's influence in the company. He also spends more time with Emma, now 13, knowing that the coming storm will leave her devastated. Their weekend museum trips and tech show programs became memories he treasured, armor for what was to come. When Nathan finally confronts Sarah, it is with the calm of a predator that has driven its prey into extinction. "I know about you and Brian," he said simply one night after Emma had gone to bed. Sarah's face turned white, then red. "Nathan, I can explain." "How long?" She swallowed hard. 2 years. The length of time hit him like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. "I've spoken to my lawyer. You'll get the divorce papers tomorrow." "Nathan, please. We can fix that." "No," he said, his tone flat. "We can't." "What about Emma?" Sarah asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'll ask for full custody." Sarah's expression hardened. "You won't get it. You're never home. You're married to that company, and I'm just sleeping with your business partner. Let's see which one the judge thinks is more detrimental to the welfare of the child," Nathan replied coldly. What followed was a divorce that quickly became vicious. Sarah realizes she can't win at infidelity and changes tactics. She begins a campaign to paint Nathan as an emotionally absent workaholic who pushes her into the arms of another man. She uses her community connections to tell sympathetic narratives to mutual friends, and most destructively begins to poison Emma's view of her father. Despite Nathan's evidence, the family court judge was influenced by Sarah's tearful performance and Emma's apparently conflicted feelings and awarded joint custody. It's the first real defeat Nathan has suffered in years, and it awakens something dark and unforgiving within him. As he watched Sarah leave the hearing with his daughter and Russell waiting in the parking lot to comfort her, Nathan swore silently. It's not over. It's far from over. They took away his trust, his family, and a part of his company, but they made a fatal mistake. They kept him alive to fight back. And Nathan Miller's comeback would be the stuff of nightmares. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Nathan sat in his attorney's office reviewing the latest motions filed by Sarah's legal team. "She wants to cut down on your visiting hours?" he asked, his voice dangerously controlled. Barry Simmons, the silver-haired divorce attorney who represented Nathan throughout the proceedings, nodded gravely. "She claims Emma experienced emotional distress while transitioning between her two homes." "Emma is fine with me." Nathan stood up and walked to the window. "It's Sarah who's manipulating her, guiding her." Barry agrees, but family courts take children's expressed preferences seriously, especially as they approach adolescence. "Emma's only 14. She's very impressionable. She's fed lies about me every day she's with them." Nathan's fists clenched involuntarily. "Brian moved in with them last week, you know? It took the ink to dry our divorce papers." Barry sighed. "It looks bad, but it's not illegal. Unfortunately, this has given Sarah's family the appearance of stability. 2 parental figures instead of 1. Nathan turned, his expression icy. "I'm going to schedule a psych evaluation for Emma. I'm going to investigate parental alienation. I want all possible legal means to expose what they're doing." "That's going to be expensive, Nathan. And it can be confusing. If Emma thinks you're attacking her mother, it could make things worse." "I don't care how much it costs," Nathan replied, a spark of determination in his eyes. "My daughter is the only thing that matters. But make no mistake, Barry, this is just the beginning. I won't just fight them in court." Barry looked at him uneasily. "Nathan, I hope you won't do anything impulsive." Nathan smiled slightly, the kind of smile that sent a chill down the lawyer's spine. "I'm never impulsive, you know. I plan, I wait, and then I act." Custody battles over the next year became notorious in the local legal community. Nathan went out of his way to hire a child psychologist, private investigator, and parenting coach. He documented every canceled visit, every negative comment Emma made about her mother's family, every time Brian crossed the line as a stepfather. But Sarah fought back with the same viciousness. She puts Emma in therapy with a counselor who seems suspiciously inclined to spot problems with Nathan's parenting style. She kept track of his work schedule, his business trips, his late returns. She portrays Nathan as an obsessed businessman who treats his daughter as just another possession to be controlled. The worst blow came when Brian used his position at Miller and Taylor to portray himself as a stabilizing influence in Emma's life. Several employees, hoping to ingratiate themselves with the company's second-in-command, offered testimony about Nathan's demanding management style and explosive temper. "He's using my own company against me," Nathan tells Megan as they're in a late-night office. "Then take the company away from him," she replied simply. Nathan looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Brian has been taking shortcuts for years. Westfield safety implementation. He saves money by outsourcing key components to offshore developers, putting their data at risk. Parker's contract? He promises features we haven't even developed yet. Do you have proof?" Megan removed a thick folder from a drawer and placed it on the table. "Every infraction, every failed project, every customer complaint, it's all here. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, patiently waiting for the perfect time to use it." Nathan picked up the folder and quickly skimmed the contents, the corners of his mouth slowly rising. "Megan, you're a genius." "I just did what you would have done," she replied. "Documented everything, waited for the right moment, and then hit hard." The next board meeting became a bloodbath within the company. Nathan prepared a detailed presentation showing all of Brian's professional misconduct over the years. The projector flashed internal memos, emails, contract clauses, data analytics, and financial reports, all of which pointed to an inescapable conclusion: that Brian Taylor had sought personal gain by sacrificing the integrity of the company and the trust of its customers. The meeting lasted 6 hours. As the directors turned to Brian, one by one, for an explanation, his defense became weaker and weaker. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Brian was not only removed from his position, but also had his equity canceled, his severance destroyed, and faced legal action from the company. "This is a violation of my contract," Brian snarled as he stood up, his face reddening. "I'm suing the company." "Try it," Nathan replied calmly. "I'm sure our legal team will be happy to show the judge all the documents you signed and the evidence we just reviewed." The articles of incorporation clearly state that the board of directors has the authority to take all of the actions it is taking today in cases of fraud and misconduct. That night, Nathan gets an angry call from Sarah. "You bastard," she hissed. "You can't see us happy, can you?" "It's none of your business," Nathan replied calmly. "Brian compromised the integrity of our company." The board responded accordingly. "Nonsense. It's pure revenge, plain and simple. Think what you want, Sarah, but maybe you should ask yourself what else he's lying about. By the way, if I were you, I'd check your joint account. Brian has had some strange spending patterns lately." The call ended with Sarah screaming angrily, but Nathan didn't feel satisfied. Beating Brian professionally is necessary, but it's only the first step. More importantly, it does nothing to repair his relationship with Emma, which continues to deteriorate under Sarah's influence. By the time Emma was 15, her visits with Nathan had become an exercise in silent resentment. She answered his questions in monosyllables, rejected his attempts to connect, and spent most of her mandatory time texting friends or locked in her room. "She hates coming here," Nathan confides to Megan, who has become his closest confidant. "Every time I pick her up, it's like I'm kidnapping her." "She doesn't hate you," Megan said. "She's confused. Teenagers think in black and white, and Sarah paints you as the villain." "How do I fight it?" "You can't have a direct confrontation. All you can do is stay consistent, stay present, and wait for Emma to see the truth for herself." But waiting has never been Nathan's strong suit. After another disastrous weekend of visiting with Emma, who refuses to attend his family dinner with his parents, Nathan makes a difficult decision. He filed a petition to modify the custody agreement, requesting that Emma's preferences be formally considered. The hearing was brief and devastating. Emma, now 15, tearfully told the judge that she wanted to limit visits with her father to 1 weekend a month. "He's always working," she said, her eyes dropping, "and he's always angry. He says bad things about Mom and Brian." When asked for specific examples, Emma's answers are vague, and clearly Sarah has taught her to say things. But the damage is done. The judge modified the custody agreement to reduce the amount of time Nathan spent with his daughter, taking into account Emma's age and obvious distress. Outside the courtroom, Sarah approaches with false sympathy. You caused this yourself, Nathan. If you just accept our happiness instead of trying to destroy it. Go away, Sarah, Nathan interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. Go away while you still can. Brian stepped forward and placed a passive hand on Sarah's waist. Is that a threat, Nathan? Because I would love to get a restraining order. Nathan looked at the man who had once been his trusted partner, noting the complacency in his eyes at the designer's suit bought with Miller and Taylor's money. Not a threat, Nathan replied coldly. A promise. It's not over. You two will pay for every lie, every betrayal. I'll make sure of that. As he watched them walk away with his daughter, something crystallized in Nathan's thoughts. The legal system failed him. Conventional methods failed. It's time for unconventional solutions. That night, he called Vincent Blackwood, an old college friend with connections in both legal and not-so-legal circles. I need your help, Vince, Nathan said. Don't ask questions. There was a pause before Vincent replied, I'm listening. Emma's 16th birthday comes and goes, and Nathan's cards and gifts are returned unopened. His call went straight to voicemail. He received no reply to his text message. The wall between them becomes impenetrable, strengthened daily by Sarah and Brian's influence. But Nathan was far from inactive during this period of estrangement. With Vincent's help, he begins to gather information, not for another lost legal battle, but for something more permanent. Brian's in trouble, Vincent reported during their meeting at a nondescript restaurant outside of town while sliding through a thick folder. He tried to start his own architectural firm after you forced him out of Miller and Taylor, but his reputation was too damaged. Now he's at Comp Solutions as director of sales, earning about a third of what he used to want. Nathan flipped through the file, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. How's his gambling problem? It's gotten worse. I've tracked his activities over the past 6 months. He owes River City Casinos more than $100,000 at this point. To make matters worse, he started borrowing money from some not-so-friendly people. Does Sarah know? Vincent shook his head. She's not too happy about the downgrade in lifestyle. They had to sell their Ridgewood Heights home and move to an apartment in Westlake. She's been talking about returning to teaching, but so far it's just talk. I don't think she realizes how bad their financial situation is. What about their marriage? It seems stable on the surface, but according to my source, Brian meets a young lady at the airport hotel every Thursday afternoon who he claims is a client. Vincent removes a couple of photos and pushes them onto the table. It's obvious that the business they're discussing has nothing to do with building. Photos show Brian and a young woman entering a hotel room and leaving a few hours later. The look on his face and the way his hand rested on the woman's waist spoke for itself. He's cheating on Sarah, Nathan stated, his tone disturbingly calm. Poetic justice, Vincent commented. Not enough, Nathan replied, closing the folder. Far from it. I want more. What are you going to do? Nathan's eyes twinkled dangerously. I need you to find out every one of his financial transactions, including his gambling debt holders. I'm going to buy the debt. Vincent raised an eyebrow. That's going to cost you quite a bit. Worth it. In addition, I want details of his apartment complex manager, the bartender at the bar he frequents, and the casino staff. I need people to be willing to talk about Brian Taylor's every move. You're setting up a surveillance network. I'm gathering the tools necessary to completely dismantle a person's life, Nathan corrected. Just like they did with me. It's just more thorough and permanent. For the next year, Nathan maintained this double life. To the outside world, he is the successful CEO of Miller Architects, expanding the firm internationally and developing groundbreaking new design protocols. He dates occasionally well-mannered, independent women who ask few questions about his past and even fewer demands about his future. But his real focus remains on his elaborate revenge plan. He purchased a storage unit in the name of a shell company and slowly filled it with items that would later prove vital. He spent over $400,000 on all of Brian's gambling debts and instructed his creditors to remain silent until he gave the signal. He cultivates relationships with people in Sarah and Brian's circle, Emma's school counselor, the superintendent of their apartment building, and even the barista at the coffee shop Brian frequents. Most importantly, he begins to assemble what he calls the box of truth, a comprehensive record of Sarah and Brian's betrayal, their manipulation of Emma, and their subsequent failure. Every lie, every manipulation, every broken promise was recorded, dated, and saved. He hired a world-class computer security expert to properly obtain copies of Brian's corporate emails that showed he was continuing to commit fraud at the corporate level. He commissions a private investigator to follow Brian and his mistress and gather evidence that could be crucial in the divorce case. Megan, now promoted to COO of Miller Architects, is the only person who knows the full extent of Nathan's obsession. "Are you sure you want to go this far?" she asked one night when she found him working late, meticulously organizing the additions to the truth box. "They went further than that," Nathan replied, his voice quiet but firm. "They didn't just betray me. They systematically took my daughter away from me and used lies and manipulation to destroy our relationship. It wasn't impulsive behavior, Megan. That was calculated. I'm just rewarding them for the same effort." Megan crossed her arms. "What about Emma? How does all this ultimately help you rebuild your relationship with her?" "Sometimes you have to remove the rubble before you can rebuild," he said, his voice softening a little. "And when she sees the full truth, when she understands the extent of their manipulation of her over the years, she will make her own choices. I won't force her to reconnect with me, but she'll at least have the truth to base her choices on, not lies." The real turning point comes on a rainy Tuesday when Nathan stumbles upon Emma in a downtown coffee shop. Now 17, she sits alone, her hair dyed black, her expression solemn, sketching in her notebook. The urge to approach her was almost overwhelmingly strong. But Nathan restrained himself and instead took a seat at the counter where he could observe without being seen. What he witnessed over the next hour broke his heart. Emma is joined by Brian, whose body language screams discomfort and impatience. Their conversation quickly turns into an argument, with Brian repeatedly looking at his watch while Emma becomes increasingly agitated. When she reached across the table, as if pleading for something, Brian grabbed her wrist with such force that she flinched. Nathan clenched his fists, his nails almost piercing his palms. It took all of his self-control not to walk over and break Brian's wrist. Only the knowledge that confronting Brian was likely to alienate Emma further kept him anchored to his seat. When Brian finally leaves, Emma stays behind, wiping away her tears and returning to her sketchbook with a firm resolve. As she drew, an expression appeared on her face, one Nathan had known since her childhood, intense concentration masking deep hurt. Before leaving, he arranges for the barista to pay for Emma's drinks for the rest of the day, anonymously. It was a tiny gesture, insignificant in grand design, but it was something tangible he could do for his daughter in that moment. That night, Nathan added a new component to his plan. Brian's physical intimidation of Emma deflects something, turning his coolly calculated revenge into something more urgent and righteous. It's no longer just about his own wounds. It's about protecting Emma from people who would hurt her. "I'm going to accelerate the schedule," he told Vincent. "Brian's gotten violent. I won't wait until Emma is 18. Our preparations are not complete," Vincent warned. "Then finish it," Nathan ordered. "In 2 weeks." Vincent knows that tone. That's the sound of Nathan not accepting dissent after a decision. He nodded. "I'll arrange it." 2 weeks later, Nathan received the text message that marked the beginning of the end of his years of silence. "I hate you. Don't contact me again." The message came after Emma had visited his home over the weekend. A visitation that was mandated by a custody agreement, but so fraught with tension that there was little communication between them. Something must have happened when she got back to Sarah's. Some kind of new lie or manipulation that pushes her to cut off contact altogether. Nathan didn't respond to the text. Instead, he picked up the phone and dialed Vincent's number. "Execute the plan," he said, "now." "All stages." Vincent confirmed. "All stages. Start with the finances." The next day, Brian Taylor received calls from all of his gambling debt holders. They uniformly demand full and immediate repayment and will no longer accept installments. Meanwhile, his job at Comp Solutions suddenly became complicated. Customers began complaining about his sales tactics, an important contract was canceled over technical details, and an internal memo implied that his sales figures were artificially inflated. Within a week, Brian's life began to disintegrate. His gambling debt collectors started showing up at his doorstep and workplace. His immediate supervisor scheduled a performance review meeting. His credit card was declined 3 times, including at an important client dinner. Meanwhile, Sarah's social circle begins to receive anonymous tips suggesting that she has been mocking and belittling her friends in private. Three of her closest friends suddenly stopped inviting her to weekend parties. Her yoga instructor privately told other students that Sarah had been behind on her class fees. A recording of her arguing with Brian, apparently recorded from somewhere inside their apartment, began circulating in her social circle. For Brian's mistress, Christina, an anonymous package is delivered to her apartment containing photos of her with Brian and what appear to be photos of her with three other women. These are carefully altered. The accompanying note simply reads, "You're not the only one." Self-esteem. Nathan continues to send birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and graduation congratulations, all of which are returned unopened, all of which are added to his ever-growing collection of evidence. But now he knows that each returned package is actually weakening Sarah and Brian's front as Emma begins to question why the packages are always returned unopened, rather than never arriving as she thought. A month later, the second phase began. Brian and Sarah's condo manager discovered a leaky pipe that required a thorough inspection of their unit. During this visit, Lewis Crawford, Vincent's hacker friend, installs several covert devices that can monitor their home computers and Wi-Fi networks. In less than a week, Lewis captured key information. Brian had transferred more than $120,000 from their bank account to a private account. He was also browsing apartment rentals for single men and pages on how to hide assets in a divorce. Crucially, he withdrew money from Emma's college fund to pay off gambling debts, and then falsified bills claiming that the money went toward Emma's private high school tuition. Nathan now has everything he needs. After conducting one last check to ensure that all evidence was legally obtained, at least technically, he initiated the final phase. One evening, while Emma was using Sarah's laptop to do her homework, a system update pop-up window asked her to restart the computer. When the computer restarted, a new folder appeared on the desktop labeled Private Brian. Out of curiosity, Emma clicked on it. The contents of the folder are devastating. Photographs of Brian and his mistress, bank records showing the transfer of funds from the family account and Emma's college fund, and notes written by Brian about plans to leave Sarah and move to another state. Most damagingly, there are a series of emails that show Brian began planning how to manipulate Emma away from her father shortly after the divorce, including fabricating explicit references to fake emails about Nathan's attempts to sabotage her college applications. Emma was shocked. She immediately went forward to Sarah and questioned the documents. Sarah, completely uninformed, insisted that the documents must have been fabricated. But when Emma shows the inconsistencies on the bank statement and points out that it's Brian's handwriting and email address, Sarah can't deny the evidence. Their argument gets more and more heated, and eventually Sarah calls Brian and demands that he come home immediately to explain. Brian rushes home to find both Emma and Sarah waiting for him, with the evidence of those accusations displayed on his computer. He immediately denied it, claiming it was all a forgery on Nathan's part. But when Emma asks to check his phone and finds texts from the same woman as in the photo, his lies begin to crumble. The argument escalates until Brian yells and claims that if Sarah hadn't pushed him, he never would have needed to have an affair or gamble to escape. Just then, Emma noticed a familiar-looking box on the top shelf of the bookcase. She took it down and found it filled with letters and gifts her father had sent her over the years, all unopened. Despite both Brian and Sarah screaming and trying to explain, Emma grabbed the box with shaking hands and darted upstairs to pack a backpack. She left the apartment, unsure of where to go, but certain of one thing. She couldn't stay in a place full of lies any longer. "Are you sure about this?" Vincent asked, looking at the elaborate flowchart that covered one wall of Nathan's home office. Once we started, there was no turning back. Nathan stood in front of the chart with his hands behind his back. Each branch represents a string. Each connection represents a calculated action and reaction. 2 years of planning culminated in this comprehensive blueprint for justice. "I'm sure," he replied. "Emma turns 18 next month. She will be legally an adult, beyond Sarah's immediate control. That doesn't mean she's going to suddenly start taking your calls." "I don't expect she will," Nathan said. "But it means the legal hurdles between us will be gone, and it means the gloves can come off with Sarah and Brian." Vincent studied his friend's face. The two have known each other since their freshman year of college, when they were assigned roommates. Vincent as the privileged son of a federal judge and Nathan as a scholarship student working two jobs to make ends meet. Their friendship, which spanned decades, was built on mutual respect and an understanding that both individuals acted according to their own moral codes rather than the conventions of society. Have you considered collateral damage? Vincent asks, not only to them, but to you. To Emma. Every day, for 3 years, Nathan replied. That's why the program is so specific. Surgical strikes, not carpet bombing. Vincent nodded slowly. Okay, let's go through it again. For the next 3 hours, they reviewed each stage of what Nathan called Operation Truth. It starts with financial stress, which is subtle at first and then gets worse. Brian's gambling debts will be purchased by a shell company controlled by Vincent and then collected in one lump sum. His mistress will receive evidence of other affairs, carefully edited to make it seem more extensive than it actually is. Meanwhile, Sarah will find her social status systematically dismantled, anonymously prompting her ex-friends to make disparaging remarks about her hypothetical previous making. Carefully leaked information about financial woes would have removed her from the charity's board and social committee. The beauty is in the plausible deniability, Nathan explains, that every event could be bad luck, or retaliation by someone else, or just the natural consequences of life catching up. What about the box of truth? Vincent asked. The centerpiece, Nathan confirmed, is every card and letter I've ever sent to Emma. Every gift I gave, they prevented her from seeing. Every piece of evidence of the lies they told her about me. Photos of Brian with his mistress. Their financial mismanagement resulted in Emma losing her college fund paperwork. All in chronological order and irrefutable. How do you show her? Nathan's expression hardened. That's what your friend Lewis is for. Lewis Crawford, an expert in what he euphemistically calls data recovery and relocation, is a high-end hacker whose services don't come cheap. His role in the plan is to make sure that certain of Brian's mugshots end up on Sarah's laptop, which Emma might find while doing homework on her computer. The photos themselves are not enough, Vincent warns, and it's common for teenagers to find flaws in adults. They will adapt. The photos are just cracks in the dam, Nathan explains, and once Emma starts questioning one aspect of their narrative, the rest follows. She's smart, always has been. She just needs a reason to start watching closely. Vincent nodded slowly. What if she doesn't? She will, Nathan said with absolute certainty. Because despite everything, she's my daughter. The truth was important to her. I'm betting everything that she'll find me. Final preparation took another 2 weeks. Bank accounts are created, digital trails are covered, alibis are constructed. Nathan even arranged a business trip to Singapore, which would have put him thousands of miles away at the start of Phase 1. Not because he was afraid of the legal consequences, but because he wanted to keep suspicion from falling on him until the moment of his choosing. The night before he leaves, Nathan visits Emma's old room in his house. He kept it exactly as she left it 3 years ago. Posters of her favorite bands from when she was 15, her collection of astronomy books, the telescope by the window. It was the shrine of the relationship they once had, and the shrine of the relationship he hoped to rebuild. From his pocket, he removed an old photograph. 10-year-old Emma sat on his shoulders at a baseball game. Both were laughing. This was taken by Sarah during those last good years, before everything fell apart. Nathan puts the photo on Emma's desk as a talisman for what's to come. Soon, he promised the empty room. The next day, he boarded a plane to Singapore with the appearance of a successful CEO on a routine business trip. Only Vincent and Megan know that Operation Truth will unfold at home with the precision of a Swiss watch, while Nathan is on the other side of the world attending meetings and negotiating contracts. None of them had anticipated how quickly the program would accelerate once it began, or how Emma's own actions would turn its careful choreography into something more unpredictable and powerful. Emma Sullivan stands in her mother's check room, looking for a pair of boots she was promised she could borrow for her senior photography project. Nearly 18, she became interested in black and white photography, finding echoes of her current way of looking at the world in its stark contrasts. The check room was carefully organized, one of her mother's few consistent features, with shoes arranged by color and season on the back wall. As Emma pushed aside hanging clothes to reach the shoe rack, her hand bumped off a hat box on the top shelf. It made a heavy sound as it fell, heavier than an empty box should be. Curious, she picked it up. Unlike her mother's other storage boxes, this one was unlabeled. Her breath stopped as she removed the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes and small packages, all with her name written in handwriting she recognized immediately, her father's precise, slanted handwriting covering the envelopes, postmarked for the past 3 years. Birthdays, Christmas, graduations, all unopened, all hidden. Emma sank to the checkroom floor, her hand trembling as she picked up the nearest envelope, a card for her upcoming 18th birthday, dated 2 weeks ago. The return address was her father's house, a place she hadn't set foot in for over a year. He's been writing letters. This realization collided violently with what her mother and Brian had told her over and over again, that her father made little effort to stay in touch, that he chose his company over her, and that his occasional attempts at contact were made out of obligation rather than love. With a growing sense of urgency, Emma began to open the envelopes, starting with the earliest. Inside each was not only a card, but a letter, sometimes several pages long, detailing her father's life, asking her questions, expressing his love and hope that one day they would reconnect. One package contained a delicate silver bracelet with a star charm pointing to the nights they spent stargazing together as children. Another contains first editions of her favorite childhood books. Each gift is thoughtful, personal, and chosen with intimate knowledge of who she is. As she reads letter after letter, tears stream down Emma's face as the truth of the past 3 years is rewritten in her mind. A passage from a Christmas letter especially hit her. I drove by your school concert last night. I stood back, hoping to see you play the cello. The security guard asked me to leave because I couldn't get a ticket. I explained that you were my daughter, but without the custody papers for that particular event, he wouldn't let me stay. I sat in my car in the parking lot and imagined the music. Her mother told her that her father didn't even respond to concert invitations. Hours passed as Emma pieced together this alternate history. Eventually, the sound of the garage door opening brought her back to reality. Hastily, she put everything back in the box, but instead of putting it back on the shelf, she carried it out of the check room just as her mother entered the bedroom. Emma, what are you doing here? Sarah asks, then freezes at the sight of the box. Why are you hiding this? Emma questioned, her voice hoarse from crying. Sarah's face turned pale. Honey, it's complicated. No, it's not complicated. You lied to me. For years, you told me he didn't care, that he was too busy. But he writes letters every month. He sends gifts. He tried to come to my concert. Emma, you don't know what your father is like. I think I'm beginning to understand, Emma interrupted. It wasn't him who lied. Brian appeared in the doorway behind Sarah, his expression quickly changing from confusion to alarm when he saw the box. What happened? He asked, even though his eyes said he already knew. Did you know about this? Emma questioned. Brian's hesitation was answer enough. How can you? Emma's voice choked. How could you too hide this from me? We were protecting you, Sarah insisted. Your father, he was vindictive and manipulative. After what he did to Brian at work. That's a business matter, Brian quickly interjected. Not your concern, Emma. But Emma saw something in the glances they exchanged. A complicity that made ice flow in her veins. More lies. Forever more lies. I'm taking this with me, she said, hugging the box tightly. These are for me. Emma, wait. Her mother began, reaching for her arm. Don't touch me. Emma snapped, ducking away. I need to think. I need to get out of here. She pushed past them and hurried to her room, throwing some clothes into her backpack. The letter box was then placed in, carefully nestled between layers of clothing. Her cell phone, she left it on the bed. She couldn't stand listening to their excuses, their justifications. The bus ride across town to her father's neighborhood felt surreal. Emma hasn't been to his house in over a year, ever since she sent that horrible text message after Brian showed her fake emails suggesting that her father was trying to sabotage her college application to force her to work at his company. Another lie, she realized now, as the puzzle pieces were coming together with sickening clarity. Doubt suddenly seized her as she reached her father's street. What if he doesn't want to see her? What if 3 years of rejection had hardened his heart to her? The thought made her feet falter as she approached the imposing house. But something drove her forward. Maybe it was the weight of truth in the backpack she carried. Maybe it's a desperate need to regain those lost years. Her fingers pressed the doorbell before she could consider it. A long moment passed. Then the door opened, and her father stood before her. His expression shifted from reflexive politeness to shock to carefully guarded hope. "Emma," he said her name, almost as a question. "Dad." The word was both foreign and familiar in her mouth. Can I come in?" He wordlessly sidestepped as Emma entered the house she once called home. It smelled the same, sandalwood and coffee and the lemon polish her father insisted on using on wooden furniture. In the foyer, she unloaded her backpack and carefully removed the box. "I found this in Mom's closet." Her voice choked as she handed it to him. When her father opened the box and saw its contents, something in his face changed. Cracks appeared in the calm facade he had always maintained. His usually so steady hand trembled slightly as he picked up an unopened card. "She kept it from you," he said, a statement rather than a question. "All of it. She told me you never tried to contact me. Then you're too busy with the company to care." Her father's eyes closed briefly, pain etching into the lines around his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, they glistened with unshed tears. "Mommy was wrong," Emma continued, her own eyes moist again. "About too many things." The dam broke then, and tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry about that text. Trust them, yeah." "No." His voice was firm, despite its roughness. "You have nothing to apologize for, Emma. You are a child, caught between adults who should have protected you from exactly this kind of pain." He put the box down and, after a moment's hesitation, opened his arms. Emma stepped into his embrace, the familiar scent of his cologne unlocking memories she'd suppressed for years. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Little did any of them know, in this moment of reconciliation, that this was only the beginning, that the box of letters represented only a small part of the truth that was about to be revealed. 3 days after Emma arrived at his house, Nathan was sitting in his study reviewing contracts when the security system announced a visitor at the door. The camera shows Sarah's SUV with her and Brian inside. Block them was his first instinct, but he reconsidered. This confrontation was inevitable, and perhaps best done on his terms and on his territory. "Let them in," he instructed the system, then went to find Emma, who was in the kitchen making tea. "Your mom and Brian are here," he said carefully, watching her expression. The past few days have been careful rebuilds. Conversations over morning coffee, hesitant questions about the years they missed, prudent steps towards trust. He wouldn't force her into a confrontation she wasn't ready for. "Do you want me to kick them out?" he asked. Emma took a deep breath and squared her shoulders, a gesture so like his own that it made his heart ache. "No," she decided. "I need to hear what they have to say." Nathan nodded. "I'll always be there for you." "Actually," Emma said, looking him directly in the eye, "I'd like to talk to them alone first. If that's okay." The request surprised him, but he respected the power behind it. "Sure, use the living room. I'll be in my study if you need me." A few moments later, the doorbell rang. Nathan answers the door, his face an expressionless mask as he looks at a couple on the doorstep. Sarah has been aging for the past 3 years. Fine lines around the eyes and mouth were not there before. Brian looks worse, with a thicker waistline and a thinner hairline. The business executive confident posture was replaced by something more hunch and defensive. "Nathan," Sarah began, her voice pretending to be bright, "we're here to pick up Emma." "Emma's not a child anymore," he replied coldly. "She makes her own decisions about where to live." "She turns 18 in a week," Brian interjected, "and legally." "Legally, I could have the police remove you from my property," Nathan interrupted. "But Emma agreed to talk to you. She's in the living room." He sidled up to let them in, but made no move to guide them. Make them feel like they are intruders. As they moved toward the living room, Nathan returned to his study, leaving the door half covered. He wasn't going to eavesdrop, but he wanted to be able to hear if Emma called him. The conversation starts off rather civilly, Sarah's voice pleading, Brian reasonable and concerned. But within minutes, the tone changed. "You have no right to take those letters," Sarah's voice rose sharply. "Those are private." "Private?" Emma's incredible reply was clear even through the half-closed door. "They are addressed to me." "We were protecting you," Brian insisted. "Your father." "No," Emma's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't dare put this on him. You have concealed his letters from me. You guys lied and said he didn't want to see me. You guys showed me fake emails saying he tried to sabotage my college application." This accusation was followed by a short silence. "Emma," Sarah's voice lowered and became cautious. What are you talking about? What fake email? The ones Russell showed me. Last year. Emma replied. The emails that made me send that horrible text to Dad. Another silence, longer this time. Russell. Sarah's voice now had a different pitch. Confused, suspicion. I don't know what she's talking about, Brian said. But even from the den, Nathan could hear the defensive edge in his voice. Yeah, you know, Emma insisted. You showed me Dad's email to the Berkeley admissions officer saying I wasn't emotionally stable enough for college. You said he wanted me to work for his company where he could control me. What did you do? Sarah's voice became dangerously quiet. The dialogue devolves from there. Sarah demanded answers. Brian deflected, and Emma suggested more inconsistencies in the narratives she had discovered over the years. Nathan stayed in his den, listening to the web of lies unraveling, a grim satisfaction building. He hadn't anticipated Brian's fictitious email, which was a standalone cruelty, but it fit perfectly into the larger pattern of manipulation. The raised sound eventually culminated in the sound of the front door slamming. A short time later, Emma appeared in the doorway of the study, her face reddened, but her eyes clear. Mom left with Brian, she said, and she didn't know some of the things he did. Fake emails, threats to my photography teacher about my independent study. Nathan nodded slowly. Did you tell her about the letterbox? Yes. She tried to justify it first, saying she was protecting me from false hopes because you always put the company first. Emma's voice breaking slightly, but she couldn't look at me when I showed her the letter about my concert, about you sitting in the parking lot. I'm sorry, Emma. I never want you to be hurt by any of this. I know now. She hesitates, then asks, did you do anything to Brian at work? He keeps saying you destroyed his career out of spite. Nathan carefully considered his response. Brian made professional decisions that jeopardized our client. The board removed him based on the evidence of those decisions. Am I personally happy with that result? Yes, but it will happen regardless of our personal conflicts. Emma seemed to accept this and nodded slowly. One more thing. Mom says you're always planning something, that you never forgive people who do you wrong. Says you're patient but ruthless. Nathan's expression stays neutral, though internally he reassesses the situation. Sarah knows him well enough to know sense the plan behind the recent events. She's always been intuitive. Your mother and I have very different views of past events, he said carefully. What matters now is your well-being, Emma. Nothing else. Later in the evening, after Emma has gone to bed, Nathan receives a text from Sarah. We need to talk alone. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Riverside Park. He sent back a simple, I'll be there. This meeting will accelerate his timeline, but in some ways it may be cleaner, a direct confrontation rather than the slow dismantling he planned. In any case, endgame stays the same. That night, Nathan opened the locked cabinet in his study and examined the contents of the real box of truth. The full version, containing not only his letter to Emma, but everything else. Photos of Brian with his mistress, financial records showing how they squandered money that should have been spent on Emma's education. A recording of Sarah coaching Emma on what to say in family court. Tomorrow it will be decided which parts of this evidence will be deployed and how. What he hadn't anticipated was the call at midnight. Sarah, her voice thick with what might have been tears or alcohol or both. It was Brian's idea, she said without preamble. The letters, to hide them from her. All of it. I just wanted to hurt you as much as you hurt me. By ignoring you? Nathan asked, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Emma. By working too much? By being too perfect? By never needing me? Sarah's voice cracked. The company is your real wife, Nathan. I'm just furniture. So you slept with my business partner, took my daughter, and told her I didn't want her. His voice stayed control, but ice seeped in. It seems disproportionate. I know. The admission surprised him. I know what we did was wrong, especially to Emma. But Brian, he kept pushing for more. Fake emails, lies about you threatening her teacher. I don't know about those. And you expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything from you anymore, Nathan. I know what you're planning, something terrible, and whatever it is, Emma will be caught in the crossfire again. The manipulation is so transparent that it almost makes him laugh. That's what tomorrow's meeting is about. Appealing to my concern for Emma to save yourself? No. Her voice hardened. Tomorrow's meeting is my chance to give you a chance to back off before I go to the police about your threat to Brian." "What threat?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "The ones he's received in the past month. The ones that exactly match your model. Patient, detailed, ruthless." Nathan's mind raced. He made no threats. His plan is much more subtle than that. But if Brian receives a threat? Interesting. The timing of Brian's questions is interesting, he carefully said. Almost like he's creating a preemptive defense. "What does that mean?" "Means I'll see you tomorrow, Sarah. Sleep well." Immediately after ending the call, Nathan contacted Vincent, and he answered the phone despite the late night. "Someone's threatening Brian," Nathan said without greeting. "And it's not us." "It could be a coincidence," Vincent suggested. "There is no coincidence in this matter. Find out what happened." The puzzle was still moving, rearranging itself into patterns Nathan hadn't anticipated. But if there's one thing his years in business have taught him, it's how to adapt to changing circumstances. The confrontation will continue tomorrow, but with the new realization that maybe this isn't the only program in operation. Riverside Park stretches along the waterfront, a well-maintained slice of nature within the cityscape. Nathan arrives 15 minutes early and chooses a bench that allows clear sight lines from all directions. A pleasant spring afternoon, cherry blossoms fluttering in the soft breeze, a calm setting not in harmony with the upcoming event. He leaves Emma at home with Megan, who stops by with the excuse that she needs to sign a contract. In fact, he wants someone he trusts to be with his daughter while he deals with Sarah. At exactly 2 p.m., Sarah appeared on the path, alone as requested. She was elaborately dressed, a cream-colored suit that reminded Nathan of their court days, disguised as elegant armor. "Sarah," he nodded as she sat down next to him, keeping careful distance. "Thank you for coming," she began, hands clasped in her lap. "I wanted to talk to you about Emma." "I thought so." She's confused now, angry, but she still needs her mom. Nathan studies her profile, noting the tension in her jaw, the carefully applied makeup, but can't quite hide the signs of sleepless nights. "Emma can see you anytime she wants," he said. "I wouldn't interfere with that kind of relationship." Relief flashes across Sarah's face and quickly is replaced by weariness. "What about Brian?" "Those threats need to stop, Nathan. As I told you last night, I didn't threaten Brian." "Who's that?" "That's an interesting question, isn't it?" Nathan interrupted her. "Because while I've been watching you too, I haven't taken any direct action." Color drains from Sarah's face. "You've been spying on us? Did you really think I wouldn't after what you guys did?" She hard swallowed. "What do you want, Nathan? Punish us forever? Making Emma choose between her parents?" "What I want," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, "is justice. For 3 years, you and Brian systematically destroyed my relationship with my daughter. You hid my letters, fabricated evidence, led her against me. Every day I wake up knowing that my child believes I abandoned her. I never meant." "Intentions are irrelevant," he cut her off. "Results are important, and results are my daughter's pain." Sarah lapsed into silence, unable to counter this fundamental truth. After a moment, Nathan continued. "But recent events have forced me to reevaluate my approach." "What do you mean?" The answer wasn't straightforward. Nathan pulled out his cell phone and pulled up a series of text messages Vincent had sent that morning. Screenshots of financial transfers, emails, and flight bookings. "Brian plans to leave the country," he said, showing her the screen. "And he has no plans to take you with him." Sarah's eyes widened as she skimmed the information. This can't be right. We have remortgage closing next week. We should put a deposit on the apartment." "The remortgage money was transferred to an offshore account yesterday," Nathan told her, "along with the rest of Emma's college fund. The money you told her disappeared because of the market downer." "No." Sarah shook her head in denial. "Brian wouldn't." "The same Brian that showed our daughter fake emails turning her against me? The same Brian who's been sleeping with his assistant for the past year? That Brian won't betray you." Nathan's voice drips with sarcasm. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "How do you know you didn't fabricate all these to get revenge?" Nathan handed her a sealed envelope. Bank records, flight confirmation, hotel reservations, and Bice, single room. His lawyers have been quietly realizing the names of the assets, all independently verifiable. Sarah's hand trembled with the envelope, not opening it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite everything, you're still Emma's mom. Nathan's expression stays impassive. And because my quarrel is never just with you. It's with you too, for what you did to my family. So this is your revenge, to show me that Brian is betraying me too? No, Nathan said, standing up. Revenge would be letting it happen without warning you. Watching you only discover his betrayal after he's gone, with everything you have left. Sarah looked up at him, confusion written on her face. I don't understand. You have 24 hours, he told her. And if you act fast enough, the money can still be recovered. The legal documents you need are also in that envelope. After that, beyond my concern. He turned to leave, but Sarah's voice stopped him. Why? She asked again. After everything we've done, why help me now? Nathan looked back at her, his expression almost imperceptibly softening. I'm not helping you, Sarah. I choose not to destroy you. There's a difference. Because of Emma? Because I'm not going to become in her eyes what you and Brian tried to make me become. With that said, he walks away, leaving Sarah clutching the envelope containing the evidence of her second betrayal and the means to combat it. By the time Nathan got home, Vincent had called to confirm. Sarah went straight to the bank and then to her lawyer. Nathan's set in motion's machine works perfectly, if not precisely as he originally designed it. Emma was in the backyard with Megan when he arrived, and the two were discussing photography techniques by the koi pond. The sight made something tight in Nathan's chest relax slightly. This, his daughter safe and engaged in her passion, is more valuable than any revenge. What's the situation? Megan quietly asked as Emma went to get her camera. Brian's on the run, Nathan replied, and I gave Sarah the evidence. Megan raised an eyebrow. That wasn't the plan. Plans have changed. Sarah is still Emma's mom, and Brian. A cold smile flashed across Nathan's face. Brian will find certain complications with his escape route involving international banking regulations and flags on his passport. Later in the evening, while Nathan is having dinner with Emma, his cell phone receives a message from Sarah, thanks. He didn't respond. There's nothing more to say. 3 days later, the news broke. A prominent sales executive was arrested for fraud and embezzlement and tried to flee the country. Brian's name was splashed across major headlines. The details of his betrayal of his company and family are detailed in humiliating specificity. In the aftermath, Emma spends more time with her mother, helping her pack the apartment they can no longer afford. Sarah got a teaching position at a community college and rented a small house close to campus. It was a significant step down from the lifestyle she enjoyed during her marriage to Nathan. But she has a humility now that was absent before. Mom's different, Emma commented one night as she and Nathan sat on the back deck. Quieter, more honest, I think. When people don't have a choice, they change, Nathan replied. Did you know Brian was stealing from her too? Nathan considered his answer carefully. I doubt Brian is capable of betraying anyone if it's in his interest, including your mom. Emma nodded slowly. She said strange things yesterday. She said, you could have destroyed them both, but you chose to stop at Russell. Is this true? The truth is complicated, Emma. The important thing is that you and your mom can now move forward. No forgiveness? She asked, closely observing him. Nathan looked his daughter straight in the eye. Some things can't be forgiven, only survived. What your mom and Brian did to you, to us, falls into that category for me. But you didn't destroy Mom when you could. No, he admitted, I didn't. Because you still love her? Emma's questions are tentative, full of hope, in a way that only children of divorced parents can be. Because I love you, Nathan corrected gently. And completely destroying your mom will hurt you too. Emma absorbed this and then asked, so Brian, do you regret what happened to him? Not for a second, Nathan replied, with absolute certainty. He made a choice, knowing the risks. Consequences are entirely his own. As the sun set over the garden and the sky was colored by fierce oranges and reds, Nathan Miller felt a closure that had evaded him for the past 3 years. Brian faces criminal charges that will imprison him for at least 10 years. Sarah humbled but not destroyed, learning to face the consequences of her choices. And here Emma is, bridging the gap between her parents while forging her own identity separate from their conflict. It's not perfect, and it's not forgiveness. Nathan Miller is not a man who forgives betrayal, but it's a kind of justice, a kind of reckoning, clearing the way for what matters most, his relationship with his daughter, built on truth, not lies. The box that opens it all sits on a shelf in Emma's room. Now it's a reminder, not just of what was lost, but of what was reclaimed. Painfully won truths, but worth every battle. What happens now? Emma asked as the darkness fell. Nathan put his hand on hers, a gesture that would have been impossible a few months ago. Now, he said, we start over. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.